Collage Poetry Presentation by Elizabeth, Rachel, Kayla, and Narissa. What is collage poetry? What is a collage and how can it become poetry? The dictionary definition for a collage is a technique of composing a work of art by pasting on a single surface of various materials not normally associated with one another, such as newspaper clippings, parts of photographs, theater tickets, and fragments of an envelope. The part of that definition that I want to focus on the most is the term pasting. Essentially, a collage is taking the examples provided, newspaper clippings, parts of photographs, theater tickets, and envelopes, and pasting them where they might not originally belong. It's the art of taking something and putting it surrounded by other items that are meaningless when they stand alone. An article written by Marjorie Perloff states, "The feather mosaic pictures made by the Aztecs of Mexico are not quite collages in our sense of the word. For a collage always involves the transfer of materials from one context to another. So, when you do this, you can create a collage. The basic idea of poetry is that it conveys a message through the use of language or text. A collage can bring these same elements through the use of shapes, particular items that mean nothing apart but something together, and text in the form of images. The possibilities for creating a collage poetry are endless." According to the Poetry Foundation, and I quote, "Collage was first developed in the early 20th century by Pablo Picasso and other Cubists. Some other mentioned are the groups of Dadaist and Surrealists. Other poets include Tristan Tzara, Ezra Pound, Susan Howe, Ted Bergen, and T.S. Eliot. Also mentioned on the site titled Marjorie Perloff, a collage dates back further than Picasso. Gifts made out of paper and words, such as Valentine's Day cards that involve hearts and thoughtful notes, are examples of this. And I quote, "Further of the vases made from tiny postage stamps, popular in the 19th century America. Collages have been around longer than anyone could imagine, and they've always been telling a story. Collage poetry can come in many forms. Common forms include going back to the basics with newspaper, photos, theater tickets, postage stamps, maps, and other monumental paper forms. Nowadays, other forms of collage poetry can be created through the use of technology. This technology not only allows access to a wider variety of imagery, but it also creates the ability to digitally create collage poetry." So, why did we choose collage poetry for our presentation? I thought it was very intriguing because I never realized that images could create the use of words without actually using text. And unlike the idea of a photographic collage, it does speak to the audience. The use of imagery and other techniques to create a poem and convey a message is also unique. It's something that not everyone might think of doing.
So I chose this collage and I immediately connected it with life. There's a lot of white space in this poem. When I think of white space, I think of emptiness or some type of loneliness. There is a lot of loneliness in many people's lives, and I think that this poet could bring comfort to those that are under it. Human hands are also a big part of this picture. The hands all seem to be doing some type of action or work, whether it's easy or hard work. One of the hands is holding a handful of matches, and a few of them are holding cards or a book. There are some plants in the bottom left-hand corner of the collage, signifying life. Next to this plant is a pear, and there is also a peep in the collage. The connections being made between the activities show how life has many connections, and everything seems to be intertwined somehow. The center of the collage has a red shape that looks like a heart surrounded by blue and red veins. This is what is holding the collage together and making all of the connections. Klaus Peter Dünker was born in 1941 in Lübeck, Germany. He studied the literature of different languages like Japanese and German while he was in college, and eventually he went on to get his doctorate in philosophy in 1970. He was a filmmaker and poet that won a few different awards and honors, like the Berlin Art Prize and also the Federal Cross of Merit. He is heavily involved in international and collective exhibitions of visual poetry.
I chose this certain collage because I thought it was the most interesting and looking piece, and I was really excited to dig deep into this figure and figure out what it means. So I chose from page 309 Carol Stetzler's Anatomy, and the whole picture is black and white, which I believe makes everything blend in more easily. The background is filled with words from a dictionary describing what cells are and the definition of them. There are what looks like to be neurons in the top corner, and the man figure has a translucent image to him, so we can see his spinal cord, trachea, and lungs. You can also see where the air is going, which all the arrows are pointing out of his mouth, which makes me believe that he is either screaming or breathing heavily out. The part that I do not understand yet is why there are stars and constellations in the picture. Everything else has to do with anatomy, so maybe they're trying to combine astronomy into the picture as well. Carol Stetzler was born in Syracuse, New York in 1948. She studied theater at Smith College and communications at Emerson College. In 1980, she began making collages and from 1984, she began focusing on visual poetry. She has published 4 books. The first one is Persistence of Memory, Continuum, an autobiography at 30, Chopping Wood, Carrying Water, and Black and White.
So this is the original piece that I chose to emulate, which is Gary Bardwin's Magritte Forest. For my emulation, I chose to turn Magritte Forest by Gary Bardwin into something different. Personally, I found the outdoors very relaxing and soothing, and I did not enjoy how the original work depicts the outdoors. I wanted to give it a happier image, so I made the forest a lot brighter, much like springtime. Fall brings death and decay to nature, while spring brings new life. This gives the poem a new revival, or new life.
For my emulation, I chose page 303, Carl Jung's 100 Sunrises, 1000 Sunsets. And I thought for my emulation project, I chose to do a piece from Carl Jung because I thought that it would be really cool to make my own twist on this artwork. I changed the artwork by changing the pictures to something that means something to me. I took pictures around my hometown that I may have made tons of memories at, or I've made milestones at. To incorporate the poem's work, I took all of these photos at the time of the sun setting, just like Carl Jung did in all of his pictures he took. Since these pictures are not just random pictures from Google, but pictures from locations that mean something to me, this makes my recreation something of my own.
The poem I chose to emulate is Open Your Eye by ENGL, found on page 237. I chose this poem because I feel like it really applies is something that not a lot of people do. It was confusing at first, and it took a new perspective to be able to understand. So here's what I mentioned. This was the first poem that stood out to me from our book because I really tried to imagine this quote in my everyday life. A lot of things in life require open eyes and an open mind. I decided to emulate this poem in the way that I imagined the book by using the letter. So that's my emulation and was Open Your Eye.
For my emulation, I decided to use the original Ficus Strangulus. His artwork was terrazzo. For my emulation, I liked how the original poem was bright and colorful, but the words didn't seem to stand out to me. They didn't really have any significance that really stood out and caught my attention. So I decided that I wanted to make the words my focal point. I like the idea of originality. A newspaper text is black and white, and I wanted to keep it that way. So I decided to get rid of the color. humor is added through the text as well to kind of brighten it up, because I wanted to stick with his idea of keeping bright images with geometric shapes and lettering. So in order to brighten it up, I chose a funny text that would allow just that little bit of happiness. And I also included the geometric shapes that are created through using the original shape and image, because I noticed that looking at a lot of his other works, that's a common occurrence within his collage poems.
Here is an activity that you can do at home to further understand collage visual poetry. So use these prompts to create your very own collage of visual poetry. You may use images off of the internet or cut them out of magazines. This collage must mean something to you and be a way of expressing yourself. If none of these prompts fit your feelings, feel free to use them all. So some of these prompts include your earliest memory, an important lesson you have learned, a hero to you, a motto that you live by. And like I said, if you don't like any of them, feel free to make up your own. So I made up an example, and I chose to use the prompt of my dreams in life. I showed this by using the dream catcher in the background and words caught in the dream catcher. These words include dream, family, love, and success. So this is just a fun activity to learn a little more about collage poetry that you can do at home. This is our group presentation of collage poetry. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you were able to learn something from it. Thank you for watching.